Let's create some stone materials. So to get started, let's make some materials for flat surfaces like floors, walls, etc. So here's an example of a marble floor. You can see that the marble is broken up into tiles. So usually for flooring, marble is used as tiles. You can see some tiles here on the walls as well. And also here. Larger slabs for the walls, tiles for the floor. Here's another example of larger tiles. So basically what we need to create is a tileable tile or slab texture. So let's open up 3D Max, create a new file. Now let's create, let's say, 60 by 60 tile. So I'm using a rectangle tool. I've created a 60 by 60 tile, and I'm going to move it to the center of the grid. Just right clicking on these arrows here, and it's in the center. So 60 by 60 is a pretty large tile, so it's nice for flooring. Okay, so enable it in Renderer and Viewport, and I'm going to set the size to 3 millimeters. That's 0.3 centimeters. Okay, so this size will determine our seam size, seams between the tiles. So 3 millimeters should be pretty good. Okay, let's copy and use the Align tool to move it to the right. Set it to X position and minimum and maximum. Okay, not quite right. First, let's disable thickness for this line. Now copy it and align like this. Okay. Make another copy, align, and attach them together. First convert to editable spline, and then simply attach. Okay, copy. Let's align vertically now. Just change the position from X to Y. Okay, copy again. Align. And attach together. Couple of more copies. And 6 by 6 should be pretty much enough for a texture. Okay, so let's set up our seam size, enable the thickness for this line, and let's assign a black standard material to it. Where is it? Here it is. Black material. Assign. I'm going to reset the renderer to default scanline and increase the rendering size to 5000. So last thing I'm gonna do is set up my rendering environment to white color. Okay, press render, and here is a nice line rendering of 60 by 60 tile with 3mm seams. Okay, so let's render it. And now just save the image as a PNG file. I'm going to name it 60 by 60. Okay, make sure you save the alpha channel as well. And open it up in Photoshop. So here it is. First thing we got to do is trim the transparent pixels. Simply pick the trim tool and make sure it's set to transparent pixels. Okay, and this trims the waste away. Now create a new layer, drag and drop it below the lines and fill it with a white color. Okay, make sure you disable all layers and fill it. So this is a tile line drawing. We can save it as 60 by 60. Okay. And now let's fill it with a marble texture. To do that, first we need to find some large resolution marble photographs on Google. I've already done that, and here are my results. These are all pretty large and usable. So we're going to create some white tiles. I think this might be pretty interesting. Or the classic Bianco Carrara marble. Let's go with this one. I'll open it up in Photoshop. Select this usable area, copy it, and paste it into this texture here. Paste again, over here, over here. Now let's merge these together. Copy and use the magic wand tool to select some tiles from the line layer. Okay, and create a mask here like this. Okay, now paste. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. Select some areas and create a mask. Let's make this larger. Copy again, paste. Perhaps too large. Scale a bit smaller. Rotate it around to break up the even appearance. And continue this process until you have the whole texture filled. Okay, so that's it. Have a nice diffuse map ready. It should tile pretty well. And let's make the seams gray. So select the lines layer and use the hue saturation tool to increase the lightness of the seams like this. Okay, let's save it. 60 by 60. Bianco Carrara. Okay, so let's set up our marble floor material. So let's use this texture in the diffuse slot. Enable show in viewport and drag and drop on the floor. So the floor uses real-world map scale. So we need to figure out the size of this texture. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 by 60, 3 meters and 60. So let's try 360 by 360. So this should give us 60 by 60 tiles. Okay. For bump, I'm simply going to use the 60 by 60 PNG file and change the real world size to 360 by 360. Okay, so it's bumping nicely. And now let's look at the reflections of real stone floors. So the reflections are pretty strong, you can see them very well, but they are also slightly blurred. So here's another example. You can see the Fresnel effect here. The reflections get stronger as the surface gets parallel to your viewing direction, and the reflections get weaker as the surface approaches you and becomes more perpendicular to your viewing direction. So that's the Fresnel effect. Notice also the waviness of the reflections. They are not perfectly straight. The floors are never completely evenly leveled in the real world, so that's also something you might want to take into consideration. So let's give it some reflections. Let's try 120. For white marble, the reflections are stronger than for darker colors. Let's enable Fresnel. For marble, I would usually use Fresnel value like 3. And let's blur the reflection slightly by decreasing the reflection glossiness. I'm going to try 0.92. Okay, so that should be a basic tile material. Let's see how it renders. Okay, so this is pretty good. The bump is a bit strong. Let's try it at 10. We can also use the bump texture to make the seams not reflective. So right now they're reflecting like the rest of the material. We can change that. So let's try to copy this texture from our bump slot into the reflection slot. Paste copy. And now let's change it to a mix map. Keep old map as submap. Cut it and paste in the mix amount slot. Okay, so right now the white part or the floor, the tiles are reflecting at 100%, that's too much. Let's set it back to 120. And the seams are reflecting at 0, and that's too little, let's try 20. So these huge tiles look a bit weird for this small room. So let's try and see how it looks with a smaller size. For example, 180 by 180, this should give us 30 centimeters large tiles. Change for the other textures as well. This looks more appropriate for this scene. I think there is a slight problem in the areas where the texture is tiling. There is a larger seam there. So I think this is because we have a seam on the right side and seam on the left side, and when they are tiling they are double the size. So let's decrease the texture size a little bit. For example, -6, -6. Let's see what happened. Okay, I think this should work fine. I'm going to resave this texture now. Okay, now let's hide our marble. Make the lines darker. And save the bump map as well. Okay, let's see how it looks now. Let's re-render. So now it looks like all the seams are the same size. The only thing I don't like is I think they look a bit too blurry. To make them crisper, we can disable bitmap filtering on the bump map. So go to bump map and change the bitmap filtering to none. Okay, so now the lines are less blurry and the results are a bit sharper. So one last touch for this marble tile floor material is we're gonna give it some large waviness, slight noise in the bump map. So we don't want to lose our seams, so we will mix the noise map together with the texture. So change it to mix, keep out map as submap, and set up a noise map in the second slot. I'm gonna try a value like 100 and mix it at 50. Okay. I will also increase the bump to compensate for this mix. So now you can see the reflections are not perfectly straight, they are a bit blurry, I mean wavy. It looks much more realistic this way. Okay, so this is a marble tile floor texture. You can use it on walls as well, doesn't really matter. Okay, let's create another material with multiple marble colors. Okay, so here's my example. It's a mix of octagonal white tiles with some square black tiles. I'm gonna show you how to create this material, but I'm gonna use some different marbles for this. So I'm going to my marble folder, and for the lighter color I'm going to use something like this here, Light Emperador. For the darker color, well, perhaps the Dark Emperador. Yes, I think this would work fine. Okay, so I will open up 3D Max, open up a new window. And now I'll create some simple octagonal tiles. Create a rectangle, set the size to 30 by 30, move to the center, and convert to editable spline. I'm going to select all the vertices, set them to corner, and chamfer them by 5 centimeters. So this will give us 30 centimeters large octagonal tiles and 5 centimeters large rectangular tiles. So I'll make a copy of this. Copy. And align. Align the minimum to maximum on the x-axis. Okay. Attach together. Copy again. Align. Okay, copy, align, okay. Attach everything together and make a few more copies and align them vertically or by the y-axis. Again, 6 by 6 should be fine. I'm going to give it a rectangular profile, set it to 3 mil. Assign a black standard material. And render on a white background. Just like before. Okay, perfect. Let's save it. Save the alpha channel as well. And let's open it in Photoshop. Okay, first trim the transparent pixels. Okay, now let's reduce the canvas size so only half of this outline is visible. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 pixels probably. So I will set -8 and -8. This will trim 4 pixels from top, bottom, left and right. Like this. So now this should tile pretty well. create a new layer, drag it down and fill with white color. Okay, you can save this image now. This will be our bump map. And now let's fill it with some marble. Okay, so where's my light emperor? Here it is. So I will just copy this area here, switch to my texture and paste. A few more times. Trying to cover a lot of area here just to make it quicker. Trying to match the images I paste with the lines I rendered. Okay, I think that's enough for now. Let's merge all these marble textures together. Select everything, copy. And now select the lines layer and use the magic wand tool to select these tiles. Okay, create a mask. Like this. Now paste. So rotate it 90 degrees. Move down. Select these layers. Not layers, but these octagons. And create a mask. Okay, paste again. And mask here. So some areas seem pretty repetitive. Let's fix that. Copy this again and paste on top. Let's rotate it like this. Especially noticeable are these diagonal things here. So I'm gonna cover some of them like this. And create a mask. Okay, this is pretty good. And now let's fill the darker squares with our dark emperador. Or maybe this granite. I'm gonna use this one here. Just copy this image and paste below these layers. Paste again, move to a different area, and keep pasting and filling these squares. Okay, no need for masking here. And merge together. So okay, so this should be fine, except the little rectangles or squares on the sides will not be tiling correctly. So we need to fix that. So let's merge all the marble layers together. So all the brown emperor door is merged together. The green one as well. Now let's use the offset filter on our green marble. Okay, first let's copy this layer to another layer to get rid of the information behind the borders, and offset. Let's try 500, 500. Okay. Like this. And let's see how it looks in 3D Max. So first I'm going to change my seam color to something less intense. I'm going to colorize it, make it lighter, change the hue to something brown like this. Very nice. So I'll go to my max scene and create a new V-Ray material. Set up my diffuse map. Here it is. Enable a new port and drag and drop. So let's set it as 180 by 180 in size. This should give us 30 centimeter tile size. And assign the bump map as well. Set the correct size. And disable bitmap filtering for the bump map. Okay. Let's make it reflective. Let's try 80 for this. Darker marble doesn't need so high reflective values like white marble. Enable Fresnel, set to 3. So let's blur the reflections a bit. Okay, so reflections are nicely blurred. Let's see how it looks. So this looks pretty good. Just a couple of more touches to finish it off. So the first thing, we're gonna use this reflection mix we used on our first marble tile material to make the seams not reflective. And we're gonna change the mix amount to the correct texture. So copy from the bump slot and paste here. Okay, so this should make the seams non-reflective. And the rest of the material about 80 in reflection. And the last touch is setting up our bump map as a mix with noise, just like for our previous material. I'm gonna try the same value of 100, mix it at 50, and re-render. Now let's say you want to make the darker parts not as reflective as the lighter parts. For example, something like this black material here, and the light parts would be pretty reflective. So to do that, you would need to create another black and white texture. So let's go back to our texture, change the lines back to black, and create a new layer on top of the lines. Now, using the paint bucket tool, make sure it's set to all layers. I'm going to fill in all these little squares. Okay, so notice there is a slight white line here. I want to get rid of it, so I'm going to select all, control click right here. This will select all filled areas. I'm gonna expand the selection by 2 pixels. Okay, and fill it in black again. So here it is. I've hidden the lines, and only the little squares are left. So I'm going to save this image as another file. And now we will use it to make sure that our little squares are less reflective and more blurry than the rest of the floor. So to do that, I'm gonna use a V-Ray blend material. So I will change the material type to V-Ray blend. Okay, first I'll make a copy. And now I'm gonna change the type to V-Ray blend. Okay, pulled material as submaterial. Copy it to the coat material slot as well. And for the coat material, what I want to do is change the reflect from this mix to simple darker color, like 20 or even 10. And I will blur the reflections as well. Okay, so now I'm going to use this map I created to blend these two together. So set up the correct size, it's 180 by 180. Now it works the other way around. We want to invert it so the little squares are shiny. Okay, let's see how it looks. First we need to assign this material to the floor and render. As you can see, the little squares are not as reflective now. The reflections for them are blurred. You can even change the diffuse color of this whole coat material to, let's say, black. And it will change the little squares to black color. This way you can quickly change many different properties of the second material. If you have some tileable marble textures, you can assign them in the diffuse slot to create any kind of marble you need. Okay, so that's a nice blend of two different floor materials. I'm going to show you how to create a rougher surface for tiles. So I will copy this material here. Name octagonal tiles rough. Just renaming the materials. Okay. So let's create a rough version of this texture. So for that we need to use the bump map. And first we need to equalize the lightness value of the darker parts and the lighter parts. So I reduce the saturation of both of these layers. And I will use the curves tool to bring their lightness to a similar level, like this. Now let's see what happens if we save this image and use it as a bump map. Okay, let's go back to our scene and change the bump map image to this one we just created. Okay, let's assign it to the floor and render. See how it looks. You can see that it has a rougher surface, still pretty shiny. So for this material we probably want to decrease the reflections. Okay, let's make the bump stronger first. Turn down the reflections a bit. And blur them more. Like this. So to avoid noise, I will increase the subdose to 16. Perhaps it's now too wavy, so I will go to my bump mix and reduce the amount of noise in this map to 30. Okay. And let's see what this gives us. A bit too blurry. Let's bring the glossiness back a bit. And increase the reflections as well, just to show off the surface better. Okay. And a bit higher bump. Re-render. So that's a rough marble tile material. You We can increase the subdivs even more for a cleaner result. Let's create some stone material for 3D objects. I'm going to demonstrate on this vase. So 3D marble objects should have some translucency to them. Translucency or subsurface scattering. So the way it works is that the light penetrates the object and it scatters inside the object, making it a bit brighter. So this effect is seen on marble, jade. Look here, you can see how the light is working inside the object here. Okay, the porcelain also shows this effect. Maybe not as strong, but it is there. So for these materials we're going to use V-Ray Fast SSS2 material. So let's create a new V-Ray Fast SSS2 material. And select the marble white preset. I'm going to assign it to my vase and render it with the default settings. So this is already a pretty decent result for a simple marble object that is completely white. You can maybe increase the scattering depth, scatter radius, make the effect more apparent. And also this material works pretty fast, so the render times won't be through the roof. Okay, now you can see the scattering nicely. The object is nicely illuminated. And you can see this orange, light orange tint inside it. So this is a very basic white marble material. Basically you just pick a preset and change the scatter radius. One thing you might want to do for more realistic results is enable reflections. So now it's just faking it. So we can turn on reflections over here in the specular layer. And we can also change the single scatter mode to ray traced solid. Let's see how it looks. So now it will take a longer time to render. So this looks pretty nice. And you can use it as your basic marble material. So we can create a porcelain material from this as well. Let's copy it to another slot. Rename to porcelain. And what I'm going to do is change the specular glossiness to 0.95. So look at the porcelain sink here. It's very reflective and the reflections are quite sharp. Maybe even higher than 0.95. Let's try 0.97. And I will also change the subsurface color to desaturated gray. I will desaturate the scatter color as well and the diffuse color. Let's assign to selection and re-render. Okay, cancel that. And the porcelain probably also has a slightly smaller scatter radius. Let's try 3. Very nice shiny porcelain material here. Okay, so that's a porcelain material. Now let's create a marble material. that has some nice dark black veins. So to do that, we first have to create a nice styleable marble texture. I'm gonna make one from this texture, this photograph over here. Okay, crop it, copy everything, crop again, and paste here. I'm gonna try to match up the veins like this. And now just use the eraser tool to blend these together like this. Too soft. Let's try a harder brush. Okay, looks better. And just blend it together. Maybe let's make this one a bit darker. I think that's fine. Merge everything together. Use the crop tool to make a square texture. Okay, so here it is. Now select the clone stamp tool. Use a low hardness, not too large size. And just fix these seams over here. Okay, like that. Okay, let's use the offset filter now. And now we have to get rid of the seams. I'll use a larger brush for this, and even softer one. Okay, offset again. Here are some seams. And I think this should work. Let's save it. And now let's go back to our scene. So I've copied this material, and I'm gonna assign the texture to the overall color slot. Here it is, show in viewport, and assign. Okay, 1 by 1 was fine. Let's render and see how it looks. So you can use any marble texture you want in the overall color slot to change the basic appearance of the material. Okay, so now let's make another version of this marble material. This time we're gonna make the inner seams or corners to appear darker. So let's look at this. Well, it's not a good example. Okay. Here. So this has a bit more brownish tint to it. And the inner corners are a tiny bit darker. So this brings out the shape better. So first We will give our marble a different color. Create a new layer and fill it with something orange beige like this. Change the blending modes. Okay, I think like this. Okay, so I will copy this material here. Okay, so we made a copy. We'll change the texture to the slightly darkened one. And let's create a V-Ray blend material here. So click on the V-Ray Fast SSS2 and change it to V-Ray blend. Make sure you keep the old material as submaterial. And let's create a coat material. So it's a simple V-Ray material with a beige brownish color like this. So right now it's blending at 50%. We don't want that. We want to use the V-Ray dirt map for blending. So I will set up a V-Ray dirt map in the blend amount slot. We'll change the occluded color and unoccluded color around. So the deeper parts will show through this brown material. And I will reduce the radius to 3 centimeters for now. Okay, just increasing the subdues for smoother result. And let's copy it from the blend amount slot and paste in the unoccluded color slot to make it stronger. Go deeper and paste again. So this should give us a pretty strong effect. And let's see how it looks. And here it is. The render time has increased a lot, but the result is pretty good for some complicated shapes, like older sculptures or vases or stuff like that. Very beautiful marble material. Okay, if you wish to create a marble material without the subsurface scattering, it's pretty simple. It's a simple V-Ray material. So some darker marbles do not show this effect. For example, let's try black marble. Let's open this image up in Photoshop. Increase the size by 100% in both directions. Paste here, 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 and here. Okay, now with the eraser tool with high hardness, I'm gonna get rid of these edges. Like this. Merge together. Use the clone stamp tool with high hardness. And just get rid of these edges here. Okay, let's try to offset our image to see the seams. Like this. And using the clone stamp tool again, simply fix it. Okay, this should be fine. I'm gonna save it as black marble. Okay, back to 3D Max. Here's our new V-Ray material. Let's rename it black marble. And simply set up the diffuse map like this. Sign showing viewport. Tiling looks fine. Let's give it some reflections. Darker marbles don't need so high values, so something like 50 might be enough. And enable Fresnel. For marble, again, you might want to use something like 3. Okay? And let's reduce the reflection glossiness just a little bit. Okay. Let's see how it looks. So this renders pretty fast, there's nothing complicated about it. You simply take a marble photograph, create a tileable texture, and set up your material like this. The results are pretty nice if your material doesn't need subsurface scattering. To finish this off, let's create a rough granite material. So I'll just find a texture for granite. Here's one, for example. Or here. Let's use this one. Open it up in Photoshop. And crop it. Let's create a square. Okay, for this busy pattern we need to erase with a hard brush. Okay, merge down, and let's try to offset it. So the seams are pretty invisible for this. You can notice them at 100% magnification, but you can't see them from afar. But still, we're gonna fix them with the clone stamp tool. Okay, here is this vertical seam. And just drawing over it. Perfect. Let's save it as granite. Let's create a bump map now. If we wish to create an unpolished version or rougher, we should create a bump map for it. So first use the black and white tool and play around with the values. Okay, I think something like this should work. Okay, save it as a new file. And let's make the granite material. Create a new V-Ray material, set up your diffuse map, here it is, show in viewport, and let's see it on the ways. Okay, let's increase the tiling a bit, like this. So that's the diffuse texture. Let's give it some very light reflections. Enable Fresnel, set it to 3, just like for the marble. And let's blur them. I'll try 0.6 for now. Okay, go to the maps, and let's use our black and white texture in the bump slot. Set it to 2 by 2. I'll also change the bitmap filtering to none for this. And let's render. Okay, I think we can use a stronger bump value. We can also try to invert it. See how that looks. I will increase the bump value to 60, and let's try to invert the output of this image. Okay, so that's a nice rough granite here. Now let's create a polished version. Copy it to a new slot, rename to granite polished, and let's reduce the bump to 5. Okay, let's also increase the reflection glossiness to 0.9. And increase the reflection a bit. Let's try 60. I think the bump is still too strong. I'll try 2. And let's see how it looks. Well, something's not quite right. The granite usually can't be polished to such a high shine like this. So I will reduce the glossiness a bit. I'm gonna try 0.8. Okay, this looks better. I'll also increase the subdues to avoid the noise. And re-render. So this would be a pretty decent polished granite. maybe the reflection should be a bit more blurry. I think that's it. Looks nice. So that's it for stone materials.